Thanks, Mr Speaker. I move that the House record its deep regret at the death on 31 October 2022 of the Honourable Robert Ellicott, AC KC, a former minister and member of this House for the division of Wentworth from 1974 to 1981, place on record its appreciation of his meritorious public service and tender its sympathy to his family in their bereavement. Mr Speaker, appropriately for someone who grew up with the big skies and broad horizons of Western New South Wales, Bob Ellicott had serious long-distance vision. Indeed, by the tender age of just 8, he'd already decided that he wanted to be a barrister. Then wartime speeches by Winston Churchill and John Curtin fired in him the desire for a life of public service. After a stint as Solicitor General, in which role he led Australia's efforts against French nuclear testing in the Pacific, Bob entered Parliament as the member for Wentworth in the 1974 election. He soon rose to become the nation's top law officer. Standing next to Malcolm Fraser, he outlined his vision as Attorney General. "My duty is to ensure the law is upheld. My duty is not to be a toady to the Prime Minister." He didn't squander the moment. He established the Family Law Court and the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, which had both been initiated by the Whitlam government. He was also responsible for the legislation which set up the Human Rights Commission. But true to his word, Bob eventually resigned over a disagreement with then Prime Minister Fraser over the independence of his role. Fraser would later lament the loss. But Bob wasn't done with politics. His next chance to leave a lasting legacy came in his role as Home Affairs Minister. The trigger was Australia's quite abysmal showing at the 1976 Olympics in Montreal. No gold medals, 1 silver and 4 bronze. And the cherry on this grim cake was New Zealand beating us in the field hockey, taking a gold medal in the process. It was a time of national soul-searching, and Bob set about creating a solution to this problem, the Australian Institute of Sport. He left Parliament in 1981, but none of the energy left Bob, and neither did his sheer range. He served on the Federal Court bench. He was arbitrator on the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and he was the lead counsel for the Australian Rugby League during the Super League battle. Over the decades, his considerable energies were extended to, among others, First Nations people, Norfolk Islanders and the Methodist Church. And until her passing in 2020, his great partner in life's adventure was his wife, Colleen. Now the adventure is done. Our hearts go out to all of his loved ones. In the words of his son John, Bob was, quote, "a man of great compassion, love and commitment." May he rest in peace.
I give the call to the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I join with the Prime Minister in honouring the life of Robert James Ellicott. Bob was born in Moree in 1927, the son of a wool classer and a shearer. The determination to succeed saw the 8-year-old boy resolve to become a barrister. Graduating with first-class honours in law, he went to the bar in 1951, making a name for himself in commercial, constitutional and property law. And in 1964, he was a QC. In that decade, and spurred on by teenage memories of Churchill and Curtin's speeches, the allure of politics grew ever large for Bob. The catapult to Canberra came with the position of Solicitor General in 1969, and the foray into politics followed soon after with his Liberal Party membership. Political connections established, Bob resigned as Solicitor General in 1973, purchasing a home in the electorate of Wentworth. There he sought and won pre-selection, soon finding himself in Billy Snedden's shadow ministry. Bob took great pride in representing the people of Wentworth, describing them as intensely individualist and strongly Liberal. For the boy brought up on a farm who witnessed the problems of life and people in the lower to middle class, as he put it, and a man inspired by his Methodist Christian faith, it was not surprising that Bob spoke passionately on the alarming extent of poverty in Australian cities, towns and the countryside during his maiden speech of 1974. He described poverty as cancerous, insidious and preventing people from realising their potential in a free society, citing rampant inflation as a key cause. Bob did not hold back in criticising the Whitlam government's social welfare program failures, saying it was more interested in vote-catching phrases than double talk. He was a man of conviction and standards, whose supporters claimed would never tell a lie. The softly spoken and mild-mannered Bob followed the letter of the law. In 1975, he defended the actions of Governor-General John Kerr in the dismissal. 25 days before Whitlam delivered those famed words on Parliament steps, Bob had produced what the National Times would describe as the most thorough, tightly argued and prophetic legal opinion. But in 1977, Bob's same principle saw him resign from the position of Attorney-General to which he had been appointed under Malcolm Fraser. He believed that the Prime Minister and Cabinet had undermined his discretion and independence as AG in the Sankey criminal proceedings. Despite their disagreement, Fraser applauded Ellicott's achievements as AG, including the restructuring of the federal court system and legal aid, revisions to administrative law, the appointment of the first Ombudsman, expanding the jurisdiction of the Administrative Appeals Tribunal and work to establish a Human Rights Commission. After the Liberal victory in 1977, Bob was given ministerial responsibilities for the Capital Territory and Home Affairs. The legal craftsman would leave a legacy here too, but one he didn't expect. Bob's 1978 referendum for the ACT's self-government failed, but he had set in motion the change which would come a decade later. He cleaned up constitutional arrangements for Australia's external territories, and he was the architect of the Australian Institute of Sport, which he said took off in full flight like a 747. Since 1981, the AIS has nurtured some of our finest athletes and seen Australia emerge as a world leader in sports physiology, medicine, nutrition and psychology. In 1981, after 7 years in politics, Bob returned to the field, which was his first love, when appointed a judge to the Federal Court. Though he coveted the role of Chief Justice of the High Court, Bob's legal opinions in 1975 would see him faithfully dismissed from candidacy. His highest ambition had been thwarted by his past principles. Such was the cruel melting pot of law and politics. Any personal disappointment Bob may have felt is tempered, of course, by the public recognition of his achievements across so many fields of endeavour. On behalf of the Coalition, I offer my heartfelt condolences to Bob's colleagues and his friends and family, especially his children Suzanne, Penelope, Michael and John. Bob is now at rest with his beloved Colleen. May he rest in peace.
As a mark of respect to the memory of the Honourable Robert James Ellicott, I ask all present to rise in their places.